From the golden age of Hollywood to the neon-lit world of modern streaming dramas, cinema has always had one recurring theme: men obsessing over women they cannot have. Today, we're exploring the history of simping in film, how it started, how it evolved, and how it manifests today, from Marilyn Monroe to Sydney Sweeney. But to understand this phenomenon, we first need to define what simping really is. In modern internet slang, simping describes excessive or desperate admiration, often bordering on obsession, for someone who is unattainable. In cinema, the term might not have existed, but the behavior has been on screen almost since movies began. Male characters bending over backward, literally risking everything for the woman they desire, is not a new invention. What has changed is how these portrayals reflect societal ideas of desire, gender roles, and idealization over time. Let's begin with Marilyn Monroe, the quintessential Hollywood muse. Monroe's career in the 1950s and early 1960s gave rise to one of the most enduring archetypes of female desirability in film history. Her roles often placed her at the center of male desire, almost as if she were untouchable, a goddess figure whose mere presence could inspire obsession. Think of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes or Some Like It Hot. In those films, the male characters frequently perform elaborate, sometimes absurd acts just to gain her attention or affection. But it wasn't just plot-driven, it was a reflection of the culture surrounding Monroe herself. Off-screen, she was idolized, mythologized, and in many ways objectified, becoming the template for the idealized muse that male characters and audiences project onto. Monroe's characters were rarely just people. They were embodiments of desire, fantasies of innocence, charm, and allure, wrapped into a single cinematic persona. This is the first clear example of what we might now call simping in film. Men not merely attracted to, but actively obsessed with, women elevated beyond normal human reach. As Hollywood moved through the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, this archetype evolved. Films like Breakfast at Tiffany's, An Officer and a Gentleman, and Titanic continued the tradition of male obsession, but the nature of that obsession changed. In some cases, it became more romanticized, more sentimental. Think of Jack Dawson in Titanic, willing to risk everything for Rose, or Sam in An Officer and a Gentleman, whose devotion is tested and rewarded through narrative trials. Here, simping isn't framed as a joke or an absurdity. It is heroic, idealized, and central to the story. The male character's obsession is not only acceptable, it is celebrated. The audience is invited to admire it, even as we might recognize the imbalance of power and desire. Over time, simping shifted from purely comedic exaggeration to a cornerstone of romantic storytelling, illustrating the persistent cultural fascination with unattainable female figures. By the 21st century, simping in film began to intersect with media portrayals of celebrity and public desire. The lines between fictional obsession and real-world fandom blurred. Characters like Edward in Twilight or Harry in Love Actually exemplified this trend. Their admiration and devotion toward female characters mirrored the intense fan reactions that actresses and pop culture icons were experiencing in real life. Male desire on screen became both a reflection of narrative stakes and a mirror for audience obsession. The archetype expanded to include not just romance, but also the performative nature of devotion, elaborate gestures, self-sacrifice, and near worship of the object of desire. Simping in this context is no longer simply about unrequited love. It is about the social spectacle of devotion and the narrative function of elevating women to mythic status within stories. Fast forward to the present, and we see a new iteration of this archetype embodied by actresses like Sydney Sweeney. In shows like Euphoria or The White Lotus, Sweeney's characters are objects of intense fascination, both on-screen and online. Fans don't just admire her, they obsess, dissect, and idealize every expression, every line, every costume. Social media amplifies this phenomenon, making the simping not just a cinematic trope, but a participatory culture. Memes, fan edits, and commentary threads create a feedback loop. The more the audience obsesses, the more the show encourages it through framing, lighting, and narrative emphasis. Unlike Monroe, whose myth was cultivated in a controlled Hollywood environment, Sweeney exists in a digital ecosystem where audience obsession is immediate, visible, and participatory. The archetype of the untouchable muse persists, but now the audience is not passive. They are actively engaged in the act of simping. What explains the persistence of this phenomenon across nearly a century of cinema? Psychologists point to projection and fantasy. The unattainable figure allows audiences, particularly male viewers historically, to project desires, fears, and ideals onto the character without the complications of a real human relationship. Simping works narratively because it externalizes these fantasies, dramatizing longing and devotion in ways that are safe, entertaining, and emotionally satisfying. The female character, intentionally or not, becomes a mirror for desire, and male characters, or sometimes the audience itself, serve as vessels for obsessive projection. Yet there's another layer to consider: gender, power, and cultural messaging. In classic Hollywood, the male gaze dominated not only the camera but the narrative itself. Women were often presented as objects to be desired rather than full subjects with agency. Simping reinforced the notion that male desire drives the story and female characters exist largely in response to it. In modern media, while the archetype continues, there is more nuance. Characters like Sydney Sweeney's are complex, morally ambiguous, and self-possessed. The simping they inspire is often layered with awareness. Audiences recognize the character's autonomy while still feeling compelled to obsess. This adds a metatextual dimension to contemporary simping. We are not just drawn to the character, but to the idea of desire itself. Moreover, the digital age has created a participatory dynamic that never existed in Monroe's time. Obsession is no longer confined to private admiration or on-screen storytelling. It plays out in social feeds, TikTok videos, and meme culture. Simping has become performative, with audiences signaling devotion in ways that are public, shareable, and quantifiable. The lines between cinematic portrayal and real-life obsession blur. An actress can embody the archetype of the unattainable muse while simultaneously being a participant in the fandom ecosystem, whether she chooses to or not. This dynamic raises questions about agency, celebrity, and the ethical dimensions of desire in media. It's also worth noting that simping in film is not solely a male-driven phenomenon. Modern narratives show that obsession, admiration, and desire can be complex and multidirectional. Male characters can be objects of female fascination, and audiences of any gender can experience intense attachment. However, the historical lineage we trace from Monroe to Sweeney illustrates a specific cultural pattern: the elevation of women into mythic figures whose appeal generates obsessive devotion. This pattern persists because it is deeply rooted in storytelling structures, audience psychology, and the enduring human fascination with desire. So, what can we take away from this century-long phenomenon? Simping in film is both a reflection of societal attitudes toward gender and desire, and a narrative tool that continues to evolve. From Marilyn Monroe's golden age glamour, which positioned her as an untouchable muse, to Sydney Sweeney's neon-lit, digitally mediated characters, the archetype persists. The form changes, the cultural context shifts, but the fundamental dynamics remain: unattainable women, obsessive devotion, and the projection of desire.